see. I hope the video comes back.
You can't see?
Yeah, it's like it's stuck on the last frame on the frame, and it hasn't refreshed. I can just hear
Huh.
you, and that's it.
Wow. Well, so good evening to anyone and everyone out there who might listen to this. I'm Blue Heron Woman, passionista, um, creating every day a new form of government, a self-government where women and men live in harmony, live in equality, not uniformity, equality, to provide the basics of life equally for us all. And my guest, Julian Kadari, is in Bolivia, and he just disappeared. So we'll see if he comes back. And we'll hold on just a minute. To see if he comes back. He's, like I said, he's in Bolivia. Usually he's in Mexico, where internet is good. Now he's in the wilds of Bolivia.
There we go. Now it's good. Wow, cool.
There
Sorry
we
for that.
go. From the
Sorry
wilds
for
of
that.
Bolivia.
From the mountains of the Yungas region of Bolivia. So you said your introduction. I
Right.
was listening to that. Then I got lost. Did you
Right.
introduce me, or should I introduce myself?
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm Julian Katari, and if you see problems with my signal, it's because I'm at about 2,600 meters high. Kind of not such an high elevation, but very close to the summits of above 5,000 meters, and the peaks about above 6,000 meters.
That's
So
pretty
I'm in a
high.
cloud forest. Yeah, it's pretty wild, and I'm in a house that is at least 500 years old, and it's the creepiest experience that I've ever had in my life, and I'm
I'm
still in
sure.
it.
I would
And
imagine it's quite haunted.
it's not just haunted. The furniture that's here is the same furniture that the last inhabitants had, which was a Bolivian president in the year around the year 1920
Wow.
around. So I'm sleeping in a bed of an ex-Bolivian president. I'm actually sleeping in his bedroom with
Wow.
furniture that's from like last century,
Wow.
and it almost looks like it hasn't been cleaned since. So that's the
Probably.
creepiest part.
Yeah, that is.
That's the creepiest part. Oh
That's
my!
incredible.
But yeah, but I'm glad to see you, and glad to be here, and expecting a great show for tonight, or a great conversation, or whatever best word suits this experience of I need living conversations.
Right. So we're going to start with that and then move to the patriarchal psychosis of going beyond the machine tonight. So we talked last week about slavery and how it rips people from their context. And even if it's not slavery as bringing people from Africa to America, it's still corporate slavery, still rips people from their context and turns them into abstractions. So there is every reason to believe that slavery, with its unique ability to rip humans from their context, to turn them into abstractions, played a key role in the rise of markets everywhere. So let's talk about an odd and vexed concept, which is the concept of honor, which can be treated as kind of an artifact or even as a hieroglyph. a fragment preserved from history that seems to compress itself into everything and is the answer to almost everything we've been trying to understand. And we might even be able to say that honor is the excess dignity of a man that must be defended with a knife or a sword. On one hand, we have violence. Men who live by violence, whether soldiers or gangsters, are almost invariably obsessed with honor. And assaults on honor are considered the most obvious justification for acts of violence. On the other hand, we have debt. So we speak of both debts of honor and honoring one's debts. In effect, the transition to from one to the other provides us a story of how debts emerge from obligations. So to underscore the paradoxes and bring home what is really at stake here, let's talk about a story of one man named Olada Equiano, born somewhere around 1745 in the Kingdom of Benin in West Africa. He was kidnapped from his home at the age of 11. He was sold to British slavers, and he wrote a bunch of books. And readers of his books are often troubled by one aspect of his story. And that is, for most of his early life, he was not opposed to the institution of slavery, even though he was one. He eventually came around, he even participated in procuring slaves from Africa, from Benin, right? Finally, he came around to an abolitionist position, and we want to ask, why did it take him so long? And the answer lies in his integrity. He was a man of endless resourcefulness, determination, and honor, yet this created a dilemma for him, because to be made a slave is to be stripped of any possible honor. Naturally, he wished to regain what had been taken from him. His problem was that honor is, by definition, something that exists in the eyes of others. If we really think about it, it truly is. Honor is something that exists in the eyes of others. So to be able to recover it, then the slave must necessarily adopt the rules and standards of the societies that surround him or her. And this means that the institutions that deprived him or her of the honor cannot be rejected. So to this day, honor has two contradictory meanings. On one hand, we speak of honor as simple integrity. Decent people honor their commitments. This is clearly what honor meant for Equiano. To be an honorable man meant to be one who speaks the truth, obeys the law, keeps his promises, and is fair and conscientious in his commercial dealings. His problem was that honor simultaneously meant doing something else, which had everything to do with the kind of violence required to reduce humans to commodities. So the slave, in a very real sense, is dead. And how can a free person be reduced to slavery? Number one, by the law of force, which would be by surrender or capture in war, or by being the victim of raiding or kidnapping. Two, as a legal punishment for crimes. So we see that all over, wherever there is a jail full of people, they're slaves. Through paternal authority, selling your kids into, right? And through the voluntary sale of oneself. We do that every day. We do that every day to corporations.
The just under broke job.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. So what does all this have to do with the origins of money? Every damn thing. Everything. Some of the most genuinely archaic forms of money we know appear to have been used precisely as measures of honor and degradation. That is, the value of money was ultimately the value of the power to turn others into money. So in ancient Ireland, every free person had his honor price, and the jurists and lawyers created in Ireland at that time created quite the economic system based on honor price. It was really a form of entertainment, as the lawyers and jurists devoted endless hours to coming up with every possible ramification of existing legal principles based on the honor price. But the honor price wasn't paid in money, it was you owe this many cattle, you owe, right? It was all very complex. And so fast forward a few hundred years, we have the Club of Rome doing the same thing with the Uniform Commercial Code and its 60,000 codes. Same thing. Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In ancient Greek, the word for honor was timi, T-I-M-I. In Homer's time, the term appears to have been used much like the Irish term honor price. It referred both to the glory of the warrior and the compensation paid as damages in the case of injury or insult. And of course, the meaning of the word changed over the next few centuries. And on one hand, it became the word for price, as in the price of something you buy on the market. On the other hand, it referred to an attitude of complete contempt for the market. And this is still the case today. In Greece, the word timi means honor, which is seen as the most important value in Greek village society. And it's often characterized as open-handed generosity and blatant disregard for monetary costs and counting. But yet it still also means the price of tomatoes or anything else. So the word crisis literally refers to the crossroads, the point where things can go in either of two different directions. The odd thing about crisis and the concept of honor is that it never seems to have been, both of them never seem to have been resolved. So is honor the willingness to pay one's monetary debts? Or is it the fact that one does not feel that monetary debts are really that important? Well, it's probably both. So then there's the question of what men of honor really do think is important. And one historian who went through 50 years of police reports about knife fights in the 19th century Ionia discovered that virtually every one of them began when one party publicly suggested that the other man's wife, sister, or mother was a whore. So why the obsession with sexual propriety? What is it about the rise of money and markets that caused so many men to become uneasy about sex? And is it really the rise of money and markets that caused this? So we're just going to leave those questions dangling for contemplation. The patriarchy arose in Mesopotamia, as Rome conquered it, as we heard from the goddess, the last goddess prophecy, right? As ancient Rome actually conquered the world 3 times. The first time through its armies, the second time through its religion, and the third time through its laws. And each time the conquering was more thorough. And yet the empire, after all, only spanned a small portion of the globe, and yet the Roman Catholic Church is everywhere. And Roman law still provides the language and conceptual underpinnings of legal and constitutional orders everywhere. Law students from South Africa to America to North, to the Yukon, to wherever, to Peru, to Patagonia, are expected to spend a good deal of their time memorizing technical terms in Latin. And it is Roman law that provides all our basic conceptions about contract, obligation, torts, property, and jurisdiction. And now the Uniform Commercial Code. And Roman law has everything to do with property. So the notion of absolute private property is really derived from slavery, even in owning land. And there's no way to define what the ancient Romans meant about property. Jurists have been discussing this for centuries, and no one has come up with a conclusion. So one can imagine property not as a relation between people, but as a relation between a person and a thing. So if one's starting point is a relation between 2 people, then that means one of the 2 people is a thing. And this is how slaves were defined in Roman law. They were people who were also a res, a thing. So how do we see this? I don't know about in Spanish, but in America, how do we see this? We're residents of our houses. We're residents, we're residents, we're residents, we're slaves, we're things. Right. The most insidious effect of Roman slavery is that through Roman law, it has come to play havoc with our idea of human freedom. In the ancient world, to be free meant to be not a slave, since slavery means above all the annihilation of social ties and the ability to form them. Freedom meant the capacity to make and maintain moral commitments to others. The English word free is actually derived from a German root word meaning friend. And so, since to be free meant to be able to make friends, to keep promises, to live within a community of equals. So Roman slaves who were freed became citizens, and so to be free, by definition, meant to be anchored in civic community, with all the rights and responsibilities this entailed. So now, we come forward a few hundred years to wage labor, to where we rent ourselves out. We rent our freedom in the same way slavery can be conceived as a tale. So this concept of owning our freedoms and being able to rent or sell them dominates us. And to say that we own ourselves is oddly enough to cast ourselves as both master and slave simultaneously. We are owners, exerting absolute power over our property, and yet at the same time, the things being owned are the object of our absolute power.
Mm-hmm.
So the ancient Roman household, far from being forgotten in the mists of history, is preserved in our most basic conceptions of ourselves. And we haven't actually abolished slavery, we've just relabeled it.
Mm-hmm.
Ancient Greek would see the distinction between a slave and an indebted wage laborer as simply a legal nicety. And you could say, I'm not an indebted wage laborer. And I would say, really? How many mortgages do you have and how many cars do you have on mortgage? You're an indebted. And how many credit cards do you have? You're an indebted wage laborer.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a shape to the past, and it is only as we understand the cycles of this shape and patterns that we can understand them and then walk away from this machine. So let's look again at money, debt, and credit. We see social transformation occur with the invention of coinage in about 600 to 500 BC, as states everywhere started issuing their own coinage. But then around 600 BC, slavery started disappearing and the cash dried up. So the movement was back to credit again. What's the most important factor in this? A three-letter word. W-A-R. War.
Oh.
Bullion or coinage predominates in periods of generalized violence. In a world where war and the threat of violence are everywhere, there are obvious advantages to the simplicity of coinage or bullion. Gold and silver coins are distinguished from credit arrangements by one spectacular feature: they can be stolen.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, a debt is by definition a record as well as a relation of trust. And someone accepting gold or silver in exchange for merchandise, on the other hand, need not trust anything more than the accuracy of the scales, the quality of the metal, and the likelihood that someone else will accept the metal. So for much of patriarchal human history, then, an ingot of gold or silver, stamped or not, has served the same role as the contemporary drug dealer suitcase full of unmarked bills. An object without a history, supposedly valuable because one knows it will be accepted in exchange for goods just about anywhere, no questions asked. So credit systems tend to dominate in periods of relative social peace or across networks of trust. But in periods of widespread war and plunder, the systems get replaced by precious metal. And while predatory lending has gone on in every period of the patriarchy, the resulting debt crisis appeared to have the most damaging effect when money is most easily converted into cash. In Mesopotamia, where the patriarchy started, in the great temple and palace complexes, we've already talked about how money served as an accounting measure rather than physically trading hands. So merchants and tradespeople developed credit arrangements of their own, and they kept these all on clay tablets. So in Babylon, the rulers oversaw the ritual yearly with the new year breaking of the tablets, that is the debt records, so that economic balance was restored along with Mother Nature's cycles. Can you imagine that? Every year, all debt is abolished. just broken, gone away.
Mm. Sounds good at first.
Yep. But why have debt in the first place? Right? In China, they were far less bureaucratic than their Western cousins. There were no centralized temples or palace complexes, so there was little incentive to create a single uniform unit of account, so social currencies held sway. But during the lifetimes of Pythagoras, Confucius, and Buddha, we see the periods of coinage invented. And in fact, the three parts of the world where they lived is where the first coins were invented. And in fact, these areas became the epicenters of axial age religious and philosophical creativity. The kingdoms and city-states around the Yellow River in China, the Ganges Valley in northern India, and the shores of the Aegean Sea, which would be Pythagoras. So what is the connection? Let's start with the question of what is a coin?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a valuable piece of metal shaped into a standardized unit with some emblem or mark inscribed on it to authenticate it. So the first coins seem to have been created in Lydia, which is now Turkey, and they were manufactured by jewelers, but those disappeared almost instantly as coinage was quickly monopolized by the state. So by insisting that only their own coins are acceptable as fees, fines, or taxes, governments or states are able to overwhelm innumerable social currencies and to establish something like uniform national markets. And in the Mediterranean, history begins in each city with a debt crisis. And we see coinage arise as a solution to the debt crisis. But the conflicts over debt had two possible outcomes. The first was that aristocrats would win and the poor would remain slaves of the rich, meaning that they would end up as clients of some wealthy patron. Oh, do we still have that today?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The second one, but yet such states were militarily ineffective. The second was that popular factions could prevail and institute the usual popular program of redistribution of lands and safeguards against debt peonage, and so would create the basis of a class of free farmers whose children would in turn be free to spend much of their time training for war. Do we still have that today? Absolutely. This would be a military coinage slavery complex.
Mm-hmm.
So in Greece, as in Rome, attempts to solve the debt crisis through military expansion were always ultimately ways of fending off the problem, as they worked for only a limited period of time. And so we have the market economy today, born of war, taken over by the government. So do we want this? Do we really want this?
Good question. Are we willing to?
Are we willing to walk away from it?
Are we willing to do what we want? That's another thing.
Right. Are we willing to walk away from it?
Mm-hmm.
So beyond the male God and his machinery. So patriarchal godhead of all major religions is defined as one, a godhead of righteous war. Two, a dominator of women. Three, a god of wealth and hierarchic power. Four, an imperialist god who controls vast resources of wealth and power by controlling the female body and its reproductive processes as exploitable property. And five, a sexually puritanical god who defines sex as unclean and evil and thus elicits violent pornography as a sexual punishment and exorcism of women. And six, a god who thrives on policing and punishing life itself. Yeah, that's the God I worshipped. That's the God I was taught to worship. Yeah. So the world's definition of God is a self-definition of humanity. So the gods who rule us from above are simply mirrors in the sky, faithfully reflecting our own faces. The gods who rule us from within might represent deep truths of our minds and hearts, or they might reflect the profound self-distortions of for millennia of ontological misperception. So we do not know if a God is a true God or a false God until we see what kind of a world is created in that God's image.
Mhm.
As human beings, we not only worship our gods, we become them. So the God that humanity follows is the kind of humanity that we are and will be. So what kind of God or goddess do we want to see as our definition? When we look around today at our world generated by the male gods of patriarchal rule, we see warfare, degradation, suffering, and sadism. So if we continue to embrace the theology of justified holy war, we will be forever at war and inflicting war on others and ourselves. If we worship a punitive God, we will be forever punished and punishing of others. If we believe in a religion that dualizes the human sexes into mutually hostile, dominating, and submissive categories of being, then we as sexual human beings will be forever dichotomized and ravished by hostility within ourselves and among ourselves, and we will inflict our internal alienation and ravagement on everything we see. The God of patriarchy from the beginning has been a God of war and economic exploitation, incessant warfare, and economic exploitation have characterized the 4,000-year history of this male God. This has been set into motion millennia ago as the world machinery, and so every living thing on earth is entangled in this machine's gears. All our functions have become definitively embodied in its functions, and it's impossible to stop this machinery. We must simply choose to walk away and choose not to be dependent on the machinery anymore. We must choose to walk away from the co-optive suggestion that we have only two choices, which is one man's capitalism or one man's communism. A third choice would be female-oriented cooperative communalism. And I will add another choice to this to say male-female equality-oriented cooperative communalism based on regenerative agriculture, providing for the basic needs of others, which is what I am doing every day.
Mm-hmm.
Our modern world is painfully off balance, opulently rich in arms, yet poor in providing for the needs of human lives. So just as the ancient shared work and celebration ritual, pleasure-focused with healthy sexuality groups of humans were the original communalism, not communism, communalism.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bronze Age patriarchal desire to control female sex and reproduction and all human labor and production was the origin of fascism. Free in our world now is a euphemism for fascistic control over workers' lives on and off the job and the payment of feudal system wages. It is women, the fact of women's labor, that presents the most unanswerable challenge to the theoretical and practical claims of free enterprise economics, because it is the accumulated days and years and centuries of women's work, wiping noses, wiping butts, feeding kids, feeding husbands, right? That utterly refutes the astoundingly simple-minded notion that hard work equals wealth. If hard work equaled wealth, every single woman would be rich. Or every single male father, right? So food sharing is the primordial act which made us human. This definition of humanity had precedence in the hundreds of thousands of years of matrifocal goddess worshippers. And many men, all the men, embraced this definition because, especially in China, the Tao was known as feminine and could only be accessed through the female body, and therefore all men lived in harmony. They were happy to access the Tao through the female body.
Mm-hmm.
And many men have given their lives for it. The greatest men have always embodied it. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "The care is the first and only legitimate object of good government." Can you hear me? You're frozen. There you go. Are you back?
I'm back, yeah. Had a little hiccup, but I'm back.
So, or in the words of Julio Cortázar, I think he's Argentinian, the moment comes when a truth becomes clear, a truth simple as it is wonderful, a truth of knowing that saving oneself alone is not really saving oneself.
Mm-hmm.
Or in any case, it doesn't justify us as human beings. And I read this context just after our last drought here in Oklahoma, when the local big cattle ranchers were hoarding their hay and people were stealing it. And it's like, really, that is so true. Saving oneself is not really saving oneself.
Oh, wow. That's a game changer thing to hear.
Yeah.
Actually, no.
So if we have to keep surviving at one another's expense, we will never learn or remember how to live in the hope of another's well-being.
Mm-hmm.
In the true reliving of the world's first religion, we can make no distinction between the life of the spirit and the life of flesh, for they are one. But yet we have been all domesticated by 4,000 years of patriarchal dichotomizing to believe that being spiritual is different from being human. And even all the spiritual New Age gurus are still teaching this principle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we refuse to see the spirit in ourselves and others. So a unitary male-female equality spirituality must begin with the fact of being alive as a two-dimensional biological body on a living and conscious biological planet who is also two-dimensional, who is also male and female. It is time to return to that time in our genetic memory, in our dreams, when we were one species born to live together on Earth as her magic children. So what is the way out of this ridiculous psychotic machine then? Well, to do what the first clan mother of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy did. She walked away. There were actually two that walked away, and they were both named Jagona Sases, if that's pronounced right, which means great woman or mother of nations or peace queen. So that was the word I was looking for at the front. I am a peace queen. I'm not going to use the word Jagona Sase because I'm not trying to appropriate the culture of the Haudenosaunee, but I am a peace queen, right?
Mm.
They crafted a new form of government based on agriculture, and now I'm crafting a new form of self-government based on regenerative polyculture agriculture. They called it the corn way. What do we call it? Aloha Ainida living way, where women and men equally share power. The will of the people was sacred, and this form of government was a participatory culture. And then we have Hiawatha and Diganawida with the Great Law of Peace that came to the Peace Queens with their peace proposal, and 3 centuries of peace through the legacy, the League of the Haudenosaunee, or the League of the Iroquois, was born. Something that's not been accomplished since.
And it's being accomplished.
We're working on it, absolutely. Yes.
We're here sharing it with you folks.
That is the way out of the machine, is to simply walk away. Every day you find more and more things to walk away from. Sometimes it's you might look at me and say you're not really walking away, and I'm saying yes, I am. I'm telling Holy Mother, All Mother, every day, I'm done with this. I'm done participating in this. Show me how. Show me a new way. And the answers are always coming. But we have to realize this is a process.
Follow the concept. You
Right.
don't.
This is a process. We've been domesticated by this for 4,000 millennia. We're not just gonna get rid of it like that, right? Once enough of
Yeah.
us walk away, we will. It will just disappear.
But some of us
But
have to do the hard work of being the first ones, and it's
we have
always
to be willing to walk away
harder.
and say, I'm done. I'm done participating in this culture. I'm done.
But then it's harder to stay and not do this than to do this, would just be the first ones to walk away. I see it that way. It's, it's looking at inflation, looking at the situation in the world. That's a lot harder. It might seem simpler to stick to a job or get a new job or whatever, and to follow the law and to pay your taxes and to take in debt because you can't really make it without it. At first, of course, and of course, you're not going to be able to pay it, and that's a game everybody plays.
Right.
But then you can walk away from all that, and you can start thinking about feeding yourself, which is a hard. It's a long step for some to think about that. Some people just, what? I have to be a farmer?
Yeah.
I am a.
Banker.
But
I
then,
don't grow food. Right. Or I'm a
yeah,
construction worker. I don't grow food. Right. But
yeah.
right. We
But
get
then
so wrapped up in this. Our
let's
role.
let's. I once saw it was a door ceramic that had this short phrase which said the farming is the wise man's labor, and I really like that. And so anybody that's wanting to follow wise advice and that wants to walk any path of spirituality is gonna come to that door.
Right. Well, and it's, at this point, it's not so much the spirituality, it's just walking away from the system that doesn't work, understanding that the Incas guaranteed basics of life for all their inhabitants. The Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee, guaranteed peace and basics of life for 300 years, right? And no one has been able to do that since. Are you about done? Are you about done with war and debt slavery? Are you about done with credit card debt and making payments on your big ass boat and your big ass house and your big ass cars that you can't even enjoy because you're making so many payments on it? You have to work so many overtime hours. Are you done with that debt peonage? Are you ready to walk away?
It's that stupid. People
Right.
buy things to store them and don't even enjoy them, don't even
And
use
that's
them.
not pleasure. That's not healthy sexual pleasure at all. It's just a replacement for healthy sexual pleasure.
And that's a sad thing. That's
Yes, absolutely. When we'd rather go out on a boat than have great, amazing, pleasurable sex, but none of us know how because we are all into junk sex, which is about penetration and orgasm, penetration and orgasm, penetration and orgasm. So why do 99% of women not enjoy sex? Because he doesn't know anything other than penetration and orgasm, and she's focused on, oh my God, I got an orgasm to keep him happy. But because he doesn't know how to play her body, he doesn't understand that her body is the access to the Tao. It's junk sex. No matter my last relationship, he wanted it to please me, wanted it to pleasure me, and he did a good job. But 99% of the time, it was still about his orgasm.
And then, well, you have to teach him better.
Yeah, he walked away before I could teach him better.
That's it. Oh man, so are we gonna go into that subject?
Well, we're going to next week. We're going to start on our right. What did I say? Every day we're creating a new form of self-government. We have our talons, our owl talons, of self-government.
Mhm.
And one of our self-governments is healthy well-being to make disease unnecessary. So we're going to start with the germ theory next week, but we're also going to
Okay.
continue in a vein, and then we're going to move on to what does healthy sexuality look like? What does pleasurable sexuality look
Right.
like? Because 99.9% of us don't have a clue.
I like that
So,
order because you do have to clear out. For example, if you want to talk about healthy sexuality, and people are still with the germ theory and are still with
got to
this
get rid of the germ theory
uh,
first.
safe sex ideology.
Yeah,
Yeah, safe
right,
sex ideology. The condom cult. the,
right, right.
the AIDS fear. You know, you can't have a healthy sexuality, and it just forces everything into that junk situation
Right.
that we mentioned.
It does.
And
It
even
does.
junkier. I mean, it gets even junkier than just. I mean, even penetration and orgasm sounds pretty good. I think there's even worse things.
Yeah. But I mean,
You know,
mostly it's
where
really all about that, whether
people.
whatever orifice you're penetrating. Right.
Right, right, right. But I mean, it can get. I mean, you can do that in a nicer way, and it can get a lot less nice. You can get into
Yeah,
this. I
absolutely.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
and then
this is
we're also
amazing.
going to continue with something that needs to be known. We're going to
Which
start
is
with how the Quechua speakers of South America gave us riches, along with germ theory.
okay.
We're going to speak about the
Okay.
mountain in Bolivia. I
Which
have
one?
I had the name. That's so riddled. It's a
Illimani.
huh?
Illimani. Illimani. Does it sound familiar?
The Potosi.
Ah, Potosí, el Cerro de Potosí, the mountain of Potosí.
Yes.
The the golden. It was a silver mountain.
Silver. Yes.
Yeah.
That's just the start. That's just the start. We're leaving patriarchal psychosis because it's time. We've covered it in depth. We've really covered it in depth. We're done. I'm done with debt. We don't need to explore debt anymore. I'm ready to. I've walked away from debt.
Yeah.
Right. But we got to understand also coinage, money, this
Yeah.
concept of money, and how
And you've done
these.
such an amazing job of tying you've added those links that were purposely hidden from the people. There's these very important links of information, and that's what you're bringing here. You're just
Right.
making the chain of slavery visible for everyone.
Right.
So anybody that paid attention to this has to be really, really thinking twice about everything.
Yeah. So, and along with that comes this whole border crisis, which is big because it's a presidential election year, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that the people we despise for coming across the border are the ones who gave us our riches, and they still are dirt fucking poor because of us.
And
And we
treated
got to
badly,
understand this. We got to understand this. We got
and
to understand this and stop being okay with the inequality because it's bullshit.
stop being okay with hunting human beings as if they were game. How psychotic can that be?
Yeah.
Right? And you have something going on there where I mean, if I could think of something that is happening to solve that, to heal that, it's your idea with that ranch right at the border. That's the example of really caring and of really doing something. And
Yeah.
of really joining that to the act of bringing the light into the world. And some people have a hard time looking at that, you know.
Actually, I
They,
want to bring the darkness of Holy Mother into the world because we've been blinded by the light of oppression. by God of war and money for far too long. So we need to bring the darkness of Holy Mother, All Father, into the world.
Already. So yeah.
We think we've been living in the dark ages. We've actually been living in the light, the ages of oppression by light.
Oppression by light. Wow. You have to describe that more, I think.
Well, because recall that we've talked about how science has discovered dark matter. They have no clue what dark matter is, but they realize it's the biggest importance in our universe. That's Holy Mother.
It's the
Dark
bigger
matter.
thing that is that thing that drives everything and
Junk
puts
DNA.
everything together.
98% of our DNA is dark matter. Don't know how
That
it is.
sounds
We
great.
got to sink into the darkness because we've been oppressed by 2% of the light.
Yeah. So what title should I? Oh, by the way, can we skip next week?
Yeah, we can skip next week.
Because that's the week where I'm going to be going, and I might share with people here.
Deep
very
into the
remote.
jungle.
No, not at all. I'm going to a place high in the mountains, at the foot of very high mountains, where the healer people live. Of course, it's something that's in the process of being lost, being destroyed, being forgotten.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be great labor going there and trying to do something.
Yeah.
So for the week after, it would be, oh, I can't think of in my head, what day would that be? Do you have a computer with you?
Let me walk over to my calendar here. Today is the 10th. So
Right, next week?
It would be the 24th of April is when we'll be back on.
Okay. And the title for that conversation?
Making Disease Unnecessary.
Okay. Like that book that, it's a part of one of the books that you've given me to
Right.
edit. It's pretty cool.
Punching
Already
holes in germ theory, punching holes in the sacred cow of germ theory, or make it
in the millionaire's temple of the pharmacological industry, which everyone is as just the biggest believer and subordinate that you can imagine.
Yeah.
I've just seen a recent example of that. The driver that brought us here. Man, is it just it's incredible. You gotta not just punch a hole in that, you gotta destroy that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even writing it, I finally realized how much it still takes hold of me. I mean, it's right. I've had to do some real work this last week on this last couple of weeks on really disentangling myself from the germ theory.
Yeah. Well, so it's a
Personally.
powerful thing. Yeah. So I want to say that as you do this and as we share it, it's happening in a symbolic, ceremonial, and real way. It's kind of like I feel that we're constantly doing a ritual with all of this. We're constantly doing the sacred work.
We are.
With this, and this is a really important part of that sacred work. Nobody wants to look at that. Nobody wants to defy the established medical system, and we can't talk about anything else if we don't do that first.
Exactly.
Or first or second or whatever.
Yeah.
But we have to talk about that.
That becomes part of self-government.
Yeah, if you have that belief that you need to get a diagnosis to be healthy, then there's just so many things that they're just not going to be congruent with that.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
Already,
or
well, thank you.
Something outside of you can cause disease, so you put a freaking mask on your face.
Yeah, and so many other things.
And so many other things.
Cool. Yeah. So are we ready to go? Do we want to go?
Yeah, we're ready to end, so I will end it. That's right, I'm the host tonight, so.
Okay.
I will
see you folks next time, 2 weeks from now, 8:30
Yeah.
Don't miss it. Don't miss it. Making the season necessary.
Yeah. Okay.